Hi, so today I'm going to go through this question. Is obesity a choice? Now, straight away I'm going to say this is probably going to be upsetting and offensive for some people, right? The reason I'm making this video is because I see a lot of people in fitness influencer type positions, especially the scientific people, saying a particular thing. And I'm going to say my particular thing. And I'm going to be bold here and say that if you disagree with what I have to say on this, you're just wrong. This isn't a case of opinions, okay? This is actually a case of definitions. So, let's crack on. But first of all, in the spirit of definition, okay, we need to ask, what is obesity? So, obesity, let's define it, okay? And this is where immediately people start getting upset, okay? So we define obesity with a very simple thing, and that is BMI. Okay? So basically, your BMI is 30 or more. Okay? So, right? That means greater than. Okay? So if your BMI is greater than 30. Okay? Now a lot of people are immediately going to be like, well, BMI is rubbish, BMI shouldn't count, doesn't take into account muscle, so on and so forth. Actually it does. If your body mass is large for your height, which is how you calculate BMI, that is stress on your heart, regardless, okay, of whether that is fat or muscle. Okay, your heart still has to provide blood and nutrients by pumping blood around that tissue, okay, regardless of what that tissue is made of. So if you are large, which is what BMI indicates, right, for your height, that is still stress on your body, okay? So, we can define obesity very clearly. It is very simply BMI of 30 upwards, okay? So, if we have that as the result, we then have to say, okay, so is obesity a choice? So let's look at it, right? First of all, we have to look at choice itself, okay? So, if we look at choice as a timeline, okay, right, don't worry, this will make sense, okay, we have a sequence, okay, so, if you've watched any of my stuff, you'll know that I bang on about cause and effect all the time, and that is basically that if you do something, something happens, okay. If you're going to say that obesity is a choice, you have to first look at where choice comes along the timeline, okay? So what you tend to have is you'll have choice, okay? And then that will be followed by a decision, okay? So a decision is where you have made a conscious cognitive selection, a commitment, okay? So there is now no longer a choice, there is a decision, okay? So after decision is an action, okay? So an action is very much, okay, an interaction with your environment, okay? So you go from choice, where you have options, to a commitment, where you make a decision, okay, to an action, which creates an interaction to your environment, which then creates an effect, okay? So an effect is basically after the action. Are we finished there? No, we are not, because now what we have after effect is if we give enough time with this effect and repeating the effect, we have a result. Or you could use the word consequence, okay? So, is obesity a choice? Well, if we look at the timeline of choice itself, first we have the choice. Do you get obese if you make a choice? No, you don't, okay? Do you get obese if you make a decision, okay? So what this boils down to is, can you decide to be obese? Now that might seem like a weird way to put it, right? Because what you're looking at here is there are people that want to be obese. If we go back to the original definition of obese, and that is being big, There are people that want to be big. They want to be swole, they want to be jacked. They want to be obese by the very definition of it, okay? A certain weight to a certain height, okay? But they don't just get to decide to be obese. There are lots of people that want to be obese that aren't obese, but they want to be. So decision clearly doesn't cut it. So let's say they take an action, you know, where they eat an extra meal or an extra food or a cheeseburger or a donut or whatever. Does that action make you obese? No, it doesn't. However, we do know that if you take an action, there's an effect. So let's say you eat a donut. Is the effect of eating that donut going to make you obese? Unless you're literally microscopically tipping on the edge of it, no, it won't. Okay, so obesity is not a choice, it's actually a result. Because you have to give something enough time for you to get there. So just from this point of view here, obesity technically cannot be a choice, it is a result, a consequence. But it has to follow all along this here. So another aspect, okay, desire, okay? As we talked about in terms of the decision of obesity, someone who wants to be obese, they decide to be obese, but they don't do enough in this bit here to get there. There are lots of people, statistically, I would argue from a statistical point of view, that the vast majority of people that are obese, especially obese like from fat, they don't want to be. So does it make sense to describe something, okay, that people don't want to be as a choice? Okay, so is there desire which leads to that choice? In other words, yes, I choose to be obese, I choose to be something I don't want to be. That doesn't make sense. So it can't be that aspect, can it? People aren't choosing to be obese, right? There's no desire there. And even if the desire is there, that's not enough. Okay, cool. So what's next? Well, then we have the power, right? Like we said here, with the decision, do people have the power to just choose something and it happen? If I was to say to you that, let's say your BMI is 20, okay, which is in the, what's called the healthy range, okay? The healthy range being 18 to 25. If your BMI of 20, and I say I'll give you £1 million if you choose to be obese, as in 30 or more, in the next hour, and then the next hour after that, you go back to being 20. You could not do that even if you wanted to. So if that's the case, then the power of choice is not that, is it? So in other words, you can't just choose to be obese and you can't choose to not be obese, right? Doesn't make sense. Okay, so we've got a number of reasons here why obesity is not a choice. But we do realise that it is a consequence after a long enough time. Okay, so you don't have the ability, you don't have the desire, it doesn't fit in the timeline, right? By definition, obesity can't be a choice, can it? It just can't. And yet we have these fitness influencers, especially the ones in the scientific community, that like to say obesity is definitely a choice. If you followed any fitness content, you've almost certainly come across this thing where people are being condemned, as it were, for their choices, right? Now, while they may be choosing further down here to take actions that may lead to this result, this is only a consequence. It is not a choice because they don't want it a lot of the time when they're there, and the people that do want it don't always, a lot of the time don't get there. Right? And this consequence aspect takes all of this sequence to get there, okay? So now let's hammer in a little bit more. If you're going to say that obesity is a choice, right, you're a knobhead, okay? You're wrong by definition of word, but you're also a knobhead. Why? Because sometimes choice isn't even there. Let's give an example. Why would choice be missing? Okay, what scenario might there be if there's no choice? Okay, and a really easy example of that, okay, is children. Okay, a child, okay, that becomes obese, right, had no choice. They were put into that situation by other people. They had no choice. You cannot say that a child that became obese chose to be obese. That is absolutely ridiculous, and you fucking know it, okay? So we can see that how can obesity be a choice? When first of all it's a consequence, there's no power of choice, there's no desire of choice, and not everyone who's obese even had a choice all the way at the start. They were put into a situation, okay? Let's hammer home a further piece on this, okay? Let's say we take someone, they were a child, they had no choice, they were put into this sequence where the result was obesity. They had no choice in the matter. But they then become an adult. At that point of adulthood, okay, they are now in control of their actions. They decide, let's say for argument's sake, they've got to a BMI of 40, okay? Now they're a responsible adult, they have decided to take responsibility for their actions and now follow a path where their result, because of what they're doing here, the choices they're making, the decisions they're making, the actions they're taking, okay, that over time they reduce their BMI from 40 to, let's say, 31. They have consistently been doing this over time. And then some fucking knobhead science-based fitness influencer, dickhead, right, tells them that obesity is a choice. They are still technically obese because they have a BMI of 31. And yet all they have done with their own power is go in the direction of going away from obesity, but they're still obese. And you're going to say that obesity is definitely a choice. Understand this, right? Obesity cannot possibly, technically, by definition, be a choice. It doesn't work like that. But do you know what is a choice? Not being a fucking dickhead. That is something that you can action straight away. You can just decide to not be a fucking prick to people, right? Because this lack of compassion, if you're a science-based person and yet you can't even define words, understand, this isn't science, this is about language. And you can't even define basic terms in order to be compassionate or have any fucking understanding of what's going on. You're a dickhead, but you could make a choice. So, is obesity a choice? No, it fucking isn't. But do you know what? Being a dickhead is a choice. Don't talk shit when you don't understand basic words. If you're going to be science-based, define the terms properly. When you look at it, you realise, oh yeah, it can't be a choice. Obesity is a consequence, right? But there's so much prior to that. There is so many other things involved. Rather than being a fucking dickhead, make a choice to not be a dickhead, which you can action immediately with the power of choice, right? And then think, you know what? How can we actually be helpful in this situation? Because if people are in this situation and they don't want to be, they might want some fucking help rather than being told that they chose a situation they don't like being in. It's fucking stupid. Anyway, hope that helps. Have a nice day.